Historically, the Feast of Christ the King is the last day of the church year. The first day of the church year begins with Advent 1. The Feast of Christ the King may be the last day of the church year, but in its ending is a commencement, a beginning. Central to our understanding of the connection between Christ the King's feast and the birth of the newborn King on Christmas morning is our understanding of what it means for Jesus to be king. I looked up the word king in the dictionary and was given these synonyms: princely, regal, grand, royal, and exalted. All of these words we find in many of our Christian hymns in our hymnal. The word giving as the antonym, the opposite of king, is lowly. We also find the word lowly in the scriptures. In scriptures, hymns, and images, Jesus is depicted as the regal king and also as the lowly, humble servant. Over the centuries, theologies have emerged that claim one of these two dominant images of Jesus. And oftentimes, these theologies and theologians are in conflict. Theologies that emphasize the exalted king are known amongst theologians as high Christologies. Christology is the theology of Jesus. These high Christologies are often concerned with future salvation. If we're not careful, these type of Christologies have a Jesus with no impact on our world. In contrast, low Christologies emphasize Jesus as servant, living and working among the least in our society on a daily basis. If we are not careful with this Christology, Jesus becomes a social worker without divine power. So we must hold these two Christologies together. We must hold together the human and divine attributes of Jesus to understand today's Feast of Christ the King as a commencement that bridges us from this day through Advent 1 into Christmas and the newborn King. In the earthly King, we offer praise in our hymns. Just this morning we sang, "Crown him with many crowns." In the lowly servant, we read from the scriptures, "The last shall be first. Those who care for the least also care for me. The blind man is giving sight. The paralytic walks. The deaf hears. The hungry are fed. The imprisoned are not abandoned without visitors." We must not get trapped between either choosing one Christology over another, changing the meaning of the word king, or looking for the opposite that we prefer. One of the most challenging things for us to do as human beings is to hold two contradictory thoughts together without facile resolution. Likewise, it is a challenge for us to think about Jesus as an exalted king whom you and I prostrate ourselves before, and Jesus, who is our friend and our intimate companion, one we go to first in need and to celebrate with. If both images of Jesus are found in the scriptures, then how do we hold them together without the compulsion to choose one over the other? So a little bit of a lesson in the middle of the sermon to contextualize my reflections. A couple of new words for you. Perhaps, maybe not. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort caused in us when we try to hold two contradictory thoughts together. When we encounter cognitive dissonance, we seek to resolve the contradiction so that, once again, we have perfect unity, because that makes us comfortable. Jesus is either exalted or humble, but he cannot be both. There's also something called doublethink. Doublethink is when we resolve the discomfort produced by the two contradictory thoughts. We accept the possibility of Jesus being both king and a humble servant. Doublethink does not reveal a greater insight. It just holds the two images together in sort of a discipline, a sense of power of the will. There's another kind of thinking, and this thinking is modeled after the Roman god Janus. Janus had two faces, each looking in the opposite direction. And there developed this understanding of thinking as Janusinian thinking. That's hard to say. It's the ability to hold two opposites together at the same time. We think about Jesus as an exalted king and also as a humble servant. However, this kind of thinking is not the same as doublethink. The difference is the process of holding together two opposite images and the outcome. We're led to a different place. Those who follow this type of thinking do so as a process that seeks to achieve greater creative insights, transformation. Albert Rothenberg, a noted researcher, has extensively studied the use of opposites in the creative process in innovation. Rothenberg developed the argument he named Janusinian thinking. He found that geniuses often resorted to this process in the development of new and original insights. Innovation often comes through paradox. Paradoxes are those ideas that appear to be contradictory but reveal a deeper truth. I'm sure you see where I'm going. Rothenberg offers several examples of geniuses and the impact of their opposites and paradox. For illustrative purposes, I share with you one of his examples. He talks about Louis Pasteur, who discovered the principle of immunology by discovering the paradox. Some infected chickens survived from a cholera bacteria. When they and an uninfected chicken were inoculated with the culture, the uninfected chickens died and the infected chickens survived. In seeing the unexpected event of the chicken's survival as a manifestation of a principle, Pasteur needed to formulate the principle that the chickens were both the diseased and not diseased at the same time. This prior undetected infection had therefore kept them free from disease and protected them from further infection. This paradoxical idea that disease could function to prevent disease was the original basis for the science of immunology. To think in terms of simultaneous opposites, Rothenberg invites us to convert our subject into a paradox and then find a useful analogy or principle that opens up the way you and I think and live. Jesus, the King, is our subject and paradox. What is the principle yielded from this paradox? Earthly kings secure their power by control over others and the diminishment of their power. The power of earthly kings increases with their exercise of office. Christ the King has power described to us as an earthly king. The newborn king surrenders power and is willing to be born in human form like you and me. And we will learn over the course of this church year, like every church year in the past, that we have life when we are willing to die. We participate in the power of Jesus when we give up our will and follow Jesus. Now, if only we see Jesus as an earthly king to whom we owe honor, we will not hear Jesus' invitation to companion servanthood, where we are his friend in shared mission. We will be sent by the king, but with no relationship, as people in kingdoms know the king through news reports, but never meet the king, for they lack associative power and influence. They're not invited to the courts. To know Jesus as earthly king and newborn king simultaneously, we worship our God and walk humbly with Jesus, loving and offering others mercy. There need be no uncomfortable contradiction between the beauty of our Sunday morning worship, with our reverence for God, and meeting Jesus in the streets of our neighborhoods. A couple of months ago, on our overnight men's retreat in Tahoe, several of us shared stories of provocative ministers that we knew or heard about. Several of us had heard different versions of the same story. The story goes like this: Sunday worship is about to begin. Indeed, on this day, it is oftentimes the first day of a new priest in the parish. All are waiting for him or her to arrive. Just before the priest comes out, a homeless person, all dirty and staggering forward, goes up the aisle. The ushers fail to deter the person, and so the homeless person makes it to the altar. The people are horrified and now vocally expressing to get the homeless person out of the sanctuary so they may welcome the new priest. Then, at the peak of the chaos, the homeless person takes off their wig and costume and introduces themselves as their new priest. The congregation was prepared to welcome the new priest, and they had a vision of what their priest would look like and sound like. The congregation was not expecting to be challenged to meet Jesus in the person of a homeless person. The priest in this story begins his ministry in a way that opens up the creative opportunity to see differently. Beautiful worship is important. We love beautiful worship. The story of the homeless person teaches us that not far from beautiful worship, where we celebrate Christ the King, is Christ who shows up in the least of these. At the outset of my sermon, I said that the feast of Christ the King may be the last day of the church year, but in its ending is a commencement, a beginning. The new beginning is a bridge between Rothenberg's opposites that creates a new power that transforms lives through the healing power of God. To reveal this healing power, we always have to go deeper and find the way to companion in the world with Jesus to reveal the power of God. Every human decision we make holds this transforming power if we choose accordingly. During our parish stewardship season, we can apply these principles as we decide and continue to decide on the pledge we will make in 2016. We can simultaneously think about money as both a human instrument and a divine instrument. We use money, a human instrument of exchange, to do divine work of making change in the world that makes flesh of the gospel message in our communities. The exalted King is deeply rooted in the world of power, but serves through the ministry of the newborn King. We, likewise, are firmly rooted in the world of our privilege and have the opportunity to use our privilege to accompany others as together we, the people of St. Francis, hear the cry of the poor. God bless you.